This video is sponsored by Black Forest Supplements. This past week has been all about freedom of speech, with certain interests using Jimmy Kimmel as a means to bury the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and more importantly, his shooter's motivations. Motivations which just so happen to echo the shooting up of an ABC network and of ICE, but that is beyond the scope of this video. What is not is the freedom of speech aspect to this story, because behind the Jimmy Kimmel noise, there was a far bigger story the mainstream media did their best not to cover, namely Google's admission that in the alleged interest of election integrity and public health, the Biden administration demanded extensive censorship on YouTube, to which Google complied, and with great vigor. That is something I have personal experience with, and we are about to get into that. But before we do, and on the topic of health, let's take a moment to talk about stem cells, the repair crews in your body that fix whatever needs fixing, and Joe Rogan has been ahead of the curve on this for years. Just watch.
I had a full-length rotator cuff tear, and the UFC gave me a doctor in Los Angeles, and he looks at my MRI and goes, "You're going to need surgery." I go, 100%? He goes, "I don't know how you're using it now. It's a matter of time. You're going to need surgery, so it might be better to do it now." So I got it shot up with stem cells. And this was the early days of stem cells in America where you could get away with more. That you got to go to Mexico now again.
As awesome as that sounds, most stem cell therapies are illegal in the US. Just consider what would happen to Big Pharma and their profits if you could heal your knees, fix your back, or recover from surgery without bills, insurance, or endless doctor visits. It's been suggested that that just might have something to do with the FDA having blocked these treatments, thus forcing people to go overseas, where just one placenta stem cell injection could set you back by $50,000. Good news is, there's a natural way to support your own stem cell activity in the guise of high flavanol cocoa. Harvard scientist Dr. William Lee explains it here.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it. If it's in your liver, they'll fix it. If it's in your skin, they'll fix it.
While flavanols are the good stuff found in cocoa beans, they're usually destroyed during the chocolate-making process. That's where Black Forest Supplements come in. They've created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder, packed with everything your body actually needs, and it's only 20 calories. You can even mix it in your coffee or your protein shake. If you are experiencing significant aging, slow recovery, weak immunity, or you're just feeling off, then blame your lazy stem cells. But cocoa flavanols can activate them, like Fountain of Youth in a scoop. Go to my link in the description or pinned comment down below, where for the next 48 hours you can buy one, get one for free. That's only for the next 48 hours though, so act now. With that, let's get back to all things censorship and free speech. Over the past few years, Jimmy Kimmel's ratings has been in a steady state of decline, and by all external accounts. His hyper-partisan show, which actively alienates more than half the potential audience, has been a big money loser for parent company Disney. But this week was no doubt a big win for Jimmy Kimmel personally. His return monologue, where he issued a non-apology, still refused to acknowledge that the shooter's sympathies were firmly on his own side of the aisle, and even massively distanced himself from conservatives like Ben Shapiro that were actively against his cancellation, still ended up his biggest hit on YouTube. By the end of the week, he was not only reinstated by Disney's main ABC, but on all of Sinclair's ABC networks, and shortly thereafter on all of Nextar's ABC networks as well, thus ending all suppression. In their statement, repeated by Deadline Hollywood, and I'll get back to what they actually said, Sinclair wrote, "Over the last week, we have received thoughtful feedback from viewers, advertisers, and community leaders representing a wide range of perspectives. We have also witnessed troubling acts of violence, including the despicable incident of a shooting at an ABC affiliate station in Sacramento. These events underscore why responsible broadcasting matters, and why respectful dialogue between differing voices remains so important. In our ongoing and constructive discussions with ABC, Sinclair proposed measures to strengthen accountability, viewer feedback, and community dialogue, including a network-wide independent ombudsman. These proposals were suggested as collaborative efforts between the ABC affiliates and the ABC network. While ABC and Disney have not yet adopted these measures, and Sinclair respects their right to make those decisions under our network affiliate agreements, we believe such measures could strengthen trust and accountability. That was a long-winded way of saying that they believe Kimmel's distortion and misrepresentation of objective reality may encourage some to commit violence, but due to the backlash they've received over allegedly being against freedom of speech, they relent. Nextar said something quite similar. As per Deadline Hollywood, as a local broadcaster, Nextar remains committed to protecting the First Amendment while producing and airing local and national news that is fact-based and unbiased, and, above all, broadcasting content that is in the best interest of the communities we serve. We stand apart from cable television, monolithic streaming services, and national networks in our commitment and obligation to be stewards of the public airwaves and to protect and reflect the specific sensibilities of our communities. To be clear, our commitment to those principles has guided our decisions throughout this process, independent of any external influence from government agencies or individuals. This is also code for that they independently concluded that Kimmel's words were extremely biased and potentially harmful to society. But they've also received so much backlash for allegedly being against freedom of speech, which they are in favor of except for in cases like this. Nonetheless, the backlash has been so immense that they too relent. The irony here is in Jimmy Kimmel, of all people, being celebrated as a champion of free speech. Not only is the objective fact of the matter that he doubled down on denying the reality of the shooter's motivations and political allegiance, something which may fall under the hoax category, which is not permissible under FCC regulations. He absolutely has furthered a narrative which may contribute to the more unhinged members of his audience resorting to violence. And it gets even worse than that. In the past, whenever someone who weren't politically aligned with Kimmel were facing cancellation, and more often than not, for far less infringements than he himself is guilty of, Kimmel was one of those screaming the loudest that they must be cancelled and their freedom of speech revoked. So, Jimmy Kimmel is an advocate for freedom of speech, but only for those who are aligned with him politically. That is an atrocious double standard, and that takes us to the far worse revelation, namely that of political pressure on what should be independent parties. Let's begin with the current matter. All official statements from both Nextar and Sinclair have maintained that there was no political pressure behind them preempting Kimmel, and leaks from within Disney, made public by way of Deadline Hollywood, maintain the same, namely that the decision to take down Jimmy Kimmel came from Bob Iger and Bob Iger alone. Most news reporting claims of mob-like pressure from Brendan Carr of the FCC neglect to mention that there has in fact been no action taken from the FCC, and the so-called threats, however misguided they may have been, in reality referred to little more than enforcing the rules that were already in place, but that selectively weren't enforced under Biden. The only actual and somewhat credible source of there being communication between Disney and the White House is actually Trump himself, which is a pretty good source, gotta admit that. But any pressure in that communication can't have been too severe, because Jimmy Kimmel is in fact back, and at least for the moment, stronger than ever, now a martyr for freedom of speech. Albeit the most undeserving martyr there ever was. Now, I'm not defending any undue pressure being applied at all, of course, but I can't help but notice that the most undercovered story of the week was the far more insidious and far greater pressure exerted by the Biden administration on Google, which resulted in YouTube actually suppressing freedom of speech for years on end, by way of taking down channels by the thousands that didn't comply with the restrictions on free speech that the Biden administration set in place. Where Kimmel is one person who used his freedom of speech to push a verifiably false narrative that borders on a hoax, The Biden administration made Google censor thousands of channels that for the most part spoke the truth, and they did so in order to maintain a narrative comprised of insufficient information at best and outright lies at worst. I have never made a secret of the fact that I am not a fan of the Biden administration, or as more and more now come to accept that it was, a live reenactment of Weekend at Bernie's. There are several reasons for my dislike of that particular administration, but the big one is its full-on authoritarian crackdown on freedom of speech. I may not be a US citizen, but I am a content creator, and every content creator on the planet that has something real to say, regardless of nationality or citizenship, was adversely affected by the Biden administration's clampdown. Very early on in that administration's reign, Google made it clear that there were now some additional topics that creators were not allowed to discuss freely, and some notions were flat out verboten. And they were so serious about this that if you did discuss these matters and you strayed from the approved narrative, you didn't merely risk demonetization, you risked having your entire channel banned outright, with no real possibility of appeal. One of these verboten topics was the legitimacy of the Biden administration and of their leader in the first place. The other, and this was even more serious, was on the lockdowns and the COVID which triggered them. But it's kind of difficult to steer clear of that completely when almost the entire Western world was shut down for months on end, with extreme restrictions in place. Pointing out that these restrictions varied from country to country, and that some countries didn't even have any restrictions at all, and what is more, appeared to fare better for it, was a channel banning offense. So was questioning that the virus may have had a different origin than the Chinese eating pangolins at wet markets. Content creators in our sphere of the internet, which didn't even discuss these matters beyond their impact on entertainment, were still forced to use all kinds of verbal workarounds when merely discussing entertainment, using terms like the coof or the unspecified virus of unknown origin, just to get a video on another topic altogether get by unscathed. Content creators that stepped out of line even a little bit had to attend an online literal re-education camp before being allowed to publish again, and that was for mild infringements, and things got much worse when the vaccine hit the market. At that point, reporting actual news from actual scientists whose data was later proven to be 100% accurate, but which conflicted with the approved narrative at the time, was considered medical misinformation and heresy, and therefore a channel banning offense. As it turned out though, the actual misinformation was damn near everything that came from the so-called authoritative official sources. Now, Google is restoring all of the channels that, for the most part, there were some exceptions of course, but for the most part, had done nothing but ask valid questions or highlight what later turned out to be accurate medical information. That falls into the too little, too late category though, as the suppression of actual truthful information already happened when it mattered. And where the individual afflicted channels are concerned, their audience is gone and has already moved on. As a content creator, I will therefore admit it gets to me a little bit when the media complex goes on and on about what a champion of free speech Jimmy Kimmel is, while ignoring that Google now has admitted giving in to the greatest clampdown on freedom of speech in modern history, and that it was committed by the Biden administration. Since the media doesn't care to cover it, there will be no accountability for it, meaning the people behind it could potentially step back into office a mere 4 years from now. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, and before you go, remember to stock up on cocoa flavanols from Black Forest Supplements. Buy one and get one for free for the next 48 hours. Link is in the description.